What if the greatest bankruptcy in human history isn't found in a bank account, but in the version of truth we have been sold for centuries? What if the most valuable asset you could ever own, your spiritual and mental sovereignty, was quietly traded for the security of a system that was never meant to hold it? We often talk about wealth as something we accumulate, but true wealth is the ability to see the full picture when everyone else is looking at a fragment. This is about more than just faith. This is about the ultimate investment in the self, the family, and the legacy of a life lived without the chains of external control. The history of Christianity is not just a story of sermons and cathedrals. It is a story of a living, breathing movement that was almost erased by the very structures that claimed to protect it. Before there were hierarchies, titles, or grand buildings, there was a quiet, dangerous power that lived in shared meals and whispered prayers. It was a movement of conviction that reshaped how people handled money, how they treated their families, and how they found purpose in a world of anxiety. It was a startup of the soul. It was a startup of the soul that became a corporate monopoly of the spirit. But beneath the layers of management and control, the original fire still burns for those who are willing to look for it. But before we go deeper into how this hidden history dictates the very way you earn, give, and plan your life today, we must ask ourselves a question that most are too afraid to voice. What happens to the value of a message here? What happens to the value of a message when it is no longer allowed to be free? Welcome to the Upside Down Life. To understand the appearance of thought, we must first look at the difference between a movement and a system today. A movement is liquid, it is adaptable, it is driven by an internal fire that requires no external validation. A system, however, is solid, it is rigid, it seeks to preserve itself at all costs, often sacrificing the very essence of what it was built to house. When we look at the earliest days of what we now call Christianity, we see a group of people who were not practicing a religion, but navigating a reality in their world. They were not looking for a polished doctrine to agree with. They were looking for a lifeline in a world that had become unrecognizable. In the realm of personal development and financial philosophy, we see a striking parallel here. Most people are taught to follow a system of wealth, a prepackaged set of rules about debt, investment, and retirement. They are taught to be obedient to the institution of finance, but the truly wealthy, the ones who build legacies that last for generations, do not follow a system. They understand the movement of value. They understand that wealth is a lived experience, not just a number on a screen. Just as the first followers of Jesus woke up trying to make sense of a world that no longer fit the old rules, the modern seeker of truth must wake up and realize that the old financial and social rules are no longer sufficient for the depth of the human spirit. Early faith was felt, carried, and tested in the grit of daily life. It was not a theory to be debated in ivory towers. It was a practice of forgiving debts when revenge was the cultural currency. It was a practice of sharing resources when self-preservation seemed like the only logical choice. This is the intersection of faith and finance. When you choose to forgive a debt, you are not just performing a religious act. You are making a radical economic decision. You are asserting that the relationship is more valuable than the capital. You are investing here. You are investing in the social and spiritual fabric of your community rather than the cold ledger of an institution. This movement was dangerous because it was decentralized. It lived in kitchens and hidden rooms today. It did not need a permit to exist. It did not need a building to be valid. In modern terms, this is the ultimate form of decentralization, when your sense of purpose and your connection to the divine are not mediated now. When your connection to the divine are not mediated by a middleman, you are truly free. You become the master of your own internal kingdom. This is the foundation of a strong family life, a family that is grounded in truth. A family that is grounded in shared conviction rather than external obligation is a family that can weather any economic storm. They are not dependent on the approval of the crowd. They are anchored by a quiet steadiness. They are anchored by a quiet steadiness that others cannot understand. There is a profound moment in the scriptures where two disciples are walking away from Jerusalem, heavy with disappointment. They are replaying the past. They are replaying what went wrong. They are stuck in the past, mourning a version of the story that didn't end the way they expected. A stranger joins them and listens. He doesn't interrupt. He begins to explain the meaning. He begins to explain the deeper meaning of their own history. Their hearts start to burn, yet they don't recognize him until the bread is broken. This is a masterclass in the philosophy of transformation. Truth walks here. Truth often walks beside us long before we have the eyes to see it. Certainty is a poor substitute for wonder. In our pursuit of making a living and building a career, we often walk with that same heaviness in our souls. We replay our failures. We mourn the opportunities we missed. We look for God or for success in the grand, public miracles. But we miss the stranger walking beside us in the ordinary moments. We miss the fact of truth. We miss the fact that truth is unfolding even when we are certain of our defeat. The early Christian experience was about God being present before he was recognized. It was about truth arriving before the mind caught up. It was about truth arriving before the certainty of the mind could catch up. As this movement spread, it began to reshape everyday choices. It reached into mental health, offering purpose where anxiety once ruled now. It reached into practical life, changing how people earned their wages and how they planned for the future. It was not an escape from reality. It was a deeper way of standing inside it. This is exactly what we teach today. This is exactly what we teach in the philosophy of the upside-down life. You do not find freedom by running away from the world. You find freedom by engaging with it at a deeper level of integrity. You find true wealth. You find wealth by realizing that money is a tool for transformation, not a master to be served. The real turning points in history and in your own life are rarely the public spectacles. They are the private changes. They are the private transformations. It is the moment a persecutor becomes a protector. It is the moment fear gives way to clarity. It is the moment an ordinary person speaks with unexpected wisdom from within. Because they have tapped into something larger than themselves, the Holy Spirit did not arrive as a spectacle to be managed. It arrived as a conviction that was quiet, steady, and undeniable. This raises a question today. This raises a question that sits at the very heart of both faith and financial independence. Is your belief system something you merely agree with, or is it something that actually guides your decisions when it costs? When it costs you something, it is easy to have faith when the market is up. It is easy to be a person of integrity when everyone is watching and applauding. But the true measure of your wealth, both spiritual and material, is what you do when the doors are closed. What do you do when the system says one thing, but yours says another? Christianity began as a path, not a platform. It did not demand perfection. It only demanded willingness. It did not offer control. It only offered direction. Those who stepped into it felt like they had accessed something rare. It was an understanding of soul. It was an understanding that was not meant to impress others, but to transform the self. When that kind of knowing takes hold, life does not reorganize itself loudly. It reorganizes itself deeply. You start to see your work not as a chore, but as a contribution. You see your money not as a hoard, but as a seed. You see your family not as a burden, but as a legacy. But as this movement grew, it faced a test. It faced a test far more dangerous than persecution. It faced the test of recognition. History shows us that when power stops trying to crush a movement and starts trying to manage it, everything changes. The shadows were safe. The public square was a trap. When the faith that once led people to prison cells was suddenly welcomed into the grand halls of power, it felt like victory. It felt like grace. It felt like answered prayers. But relief can be deceptive. With acceptance came structure. With structure came titles. With titles came influence. The faith that once flowed freely through the hearts of people now. The faith that once flowed freely through the hearts of common people now needed official approval. Christianity began shifting from a movement of conviction into an institution of control. Imagine the confusion here. Imagine the confusion of an early believer standing in a cathedral for the first time. They hear the scriptures echoed off stone walls instead of whispered in fear. It is beautiful, yes, but beauty can be a lure. But beauty can be a distraction. The simplicity of devotion began to compete with the complexity of politics. Decisions once guided by prayer were now filtered through strategy. The question was no longer truth. The question was no longer just what is true, but what is acceptable. This is the same trap we fall into in our modern pursuit of success. We start with a passion, a movement of the heart to create some value. But as we gain recognition, as we build our own institutions and systems, we often trade our conviction for strategy. We start asking what is acceptable to the market rather than what is true to our mission now. We trade the fire of the startup for the safety of the corporation. We trade the intimacy of the family for the appearance of the perfect life. The transformation of Christianity did not erase belief, but redefined. The transformation of Christianity did not erase belief, but it redefined it. Leaders emerged who spoke more about order than about inner renewal. Doctrine became a gatekeeper, unity more than sincerity. For the everyday person, faith began to feel distant. It felt less like a relationship and more like a system to navigate. The same message that once healed anxious minds and grounded uncertain lives now came hard. Now came with expectations that felt heavy and suffocating. Yet even in this shift, something refused to disappear. Beneath the ceremonies and the power structures, the original fire still burned in individuals. It burned in the individuals who remembered what faith felt like before it had a name, a rank, or a rule book. This is where our story tightens, because the real question isn't about the history of the church today. It is about the history of you. When your life becomes organized, does it grow stronger, or does it drift further from the heart that first believed in your dreams? As we look at the silence between the lines, of history, we see that what was preserved and what was lost were often decided by human hands. Stories were chosen and arranged to fit an emerging framework of power. Whenever humans decide what stays and what goes, something sacred is always at risk. Early believers did not all experience the divine the same way. Some spoke of miracles, others of inner awakening in the soul. But as the system sought consistency, complexity became inconvenient. Writings that encouraged personal, spiritual authority were set aside. The message was narrowed, not necessarily to deceive, but to simplify now. In this simplification, nuance was lost. Imagine being a believer whose centered on the transformation of the heart rather than obedience to a hierarchy. Suddenly, your voice had no place now. Your experience wasn't wrong. It was just unwelcome. Over time, the faith that once asked people to wrestle deeply with truth began offering easy answers instead. Comfort replaced curiosity. Certainty replaced wonder. This shift affected how people related to everything, including their own prosperity. Scripture became something interpreted for them, not with them. Spiritual growth was measured by conformity. For many, life ended. For many, life stopped being a living dialogue. and became a fixed script. And when that happens, doubt doesn't disappear, it goes underground. It quietly erodes trust and authenticity. It creates a life of image. It creates a life that looks good on the outside but feels empty on the inside. Still, fragments of the original depth survived. They survived in whispered prayers, in personal journals, and in moments of solitude. They survived in moments of solitude where people felt God not as an authority, but as a presence. The Holy Spirit continued working personally, not institutionally. This raises an uncomfortable question for us. This raises an uncomfortable question for us today. How much of what you believe about money, about success, and about your own worth is inherited truth? And how much is filtered tradition? Every system simplifies to survive. But your life was never meant to be a system. It was meant to be a relationship with reality. Faith becomes law when belief turns into obligation. This is a critical turning point. When Christianity gained enforcement, what was once an invitation became an expectation. Faith, which had flourished through choice, now carried consequences for dissent. Belief was no longer only about the heart. Belief was no longer only about the heart. It became tied to compliance, and the moment faith becomes law, fear quietly replaces freedom. For ordinary people, this shift was confusing. They still believed in truth. They still believed, they still hoped, but now their spiritual life felt monitored. Questions were risky. Doubt was dangerous. The same scriptures that once brought comfort were now used to draw boundaries today. Instead of asking how your soul was doing, the system asked if you were aligned. Alignment mattered more than authenticity. This is the same pressure we feel in the modern economic system. We are told to align now. We are told to align with the expectations of society, to follow the law of consumption, and to fear the consequences of being different. Picture a farmer or a mother from centuries ago. They once followed the way of Jesus because his words healed something inside them. Now they followed because deviation could cost them their safety or their livelihood. Faith lost its softness. It hardened into duty. And while obedience increased, intimacy faded, the relationship turned transactional. Do this, avoid that, stay within the lines. This environment deeply affected mental and emotional health. When belief is enforced, guilt thrives. People learn to hide their struggles instead of bringing them to the light. Prayer becomes a performance. Confession becomes a strategy. The inner life was pushed aside now. The inner life, once the center of faith, was pushed aside in favor of visible behavior. And when inner transformation stops, spiritual and emotional exhaustion sets in. Yet, history shows something remarkable today. The human spirit resists spiritual captivity. In monasteries and remote villages, people sought the divine beyond permission. They fasted not because they were told to, but because they longed for clarity in soul. They prayed not to comply, but to connect. The spirit moved where control couldn't reach. This part of the story leaves us with an unsettling reflection. When life becomes an obligation, who benefits and who is lost? Have you ever felt closer to the truth in silence and solitude than in the structured expectations of the world? As centuries passed, preservation mattered more than transformation. Leaders feared fragmentation and loss of influence. Fear, once introduced, has a way of reshaping everything it touches. Faith was no longer trusted to grow organically. It needed guarding and defending in the world. The language of love gave way to the language of threat. Heaven was promised, but hell was emphasized far more often. This shift didn't happen overnight. It unfolded gradually, wrapped in good intentions today. Leaders believed they were protecting souls, but fear is a shortcut to obedience. Instead of inviting people to encounter the divine, systems pressured them to comply. Compliance is efficient, but never changes. Compliance is efficient, but it's never transformative. People learned what to say and how to act, but they stopped growing. For the average believer, this created a silent fracture. Outwardly, everything was strong. Outwardly, everything looked strong. Churches were full, rituals were precise, but inwardly, many felt disconnected. Prayer became a duty, not a refuge. People feared being wrong more than they desired being close. People feared being wrong more than they desired being close to God. And when fear dominates, growth stalls. There is a psychological cost to this kind of belief. Anxiety becomes spiritualized. Doubt feels like loss. Doubt feels like failure. Struggle feels like sin. Mental health suffers quietly because vulnerability is unsafe. Instead of bringing brokenness to the source of healing, people hide it. They perform righteousness. They perform righteousness while carrying exhaustion inside. Over time, that disconnect erodes trust, not just in leaders, but in life itself. Yet, even during the height of control, individuals withdrew into solitude to find the truth again. They read slowly. They prayed honestly. They cleared the noise. This leaves us with a powerful tension. If fear can fill buildings but empty hearts today, if fear can fill buildings but empty hearts, what kind of faith actually transforms a life? Have you ever confused obedience driven by fear with devotion born from love? This is the question that followed us. This is the question that has followed us through history. And it is the same question we must answer in our homes and our businesses today. At some point, unity stopped being the goal, and correctness took place. Christianity began to fracture over interpretation. Small differences hardened into firm positions. Firm positions became identities. What began as a faith centered on transformation turned into a battlefield here. What began as a faith centered on transformation turned into a battlefield of ideas. These divisions weren't always born from malice. Many truly believed they were defending the truth. But when certainty replaces humility, listening becomes impossible. Scripture was no longer a shared ground. It became a weapon. Each group clarity and authority. In doing so, they lost the ability to see. Faith through another human's experience. This created quiet confusion for the everyday believer. The message of Jesus felt simple, yet the systems around him felt complex. Why did following a message of love require choosing sides? Why did devotion come with labels? Why did the same verses inspire compassion in one place and condemnation in another? This fragmentation has costs. This fragmentation has practical consequences. Communities split, trust eroded, spiritual authority became competitive. Instead of asking how faith could heal the broken, debates focused on who was right in the end. And when winning arguments becomes more important than restoring people, something vital is lost. Grace thins, the heart grows tired. Somewhere along the way, the message grew louder than the life it was meant. Somewhere along the way, the message grew louder than the life it was meant to shape. Teachings multiplied, interpretations expanded, explanations became sharper and more refined. Yet, the quiet simplicity faded. Yet, the quiet simplicity of the original way of living began to fade. The focus shifted from who he was to what was said about him. The heart of the story grew faint. Jesus didn't teach faith as a concept. Jesus didn't teach faith as an abstract concept. He taught it while walking, eating, and touching wounds. His authority didn't come from a position, but from coherence. His words matched his life, but it changed. But as the system evolved, that coherence became harder to find. Faith became something people talked about fluently, yet lived inconsistently. Knowledge increased, but transformation slowed. For many, this was it. For many, this created an invisible tension. They knew the teachings, they understood the theology, but something felt missing. The faith they inherited sounded powerful, yet didn't always feel personal to them. It inspired admiration, but not always imitation. People were told what to believe, but rarely shown how to become. This disconnect reshapes daily life. Faith stays in conversations but struggles to enter habits. It influences opinions more than behavior. And when belief doesn't reshape how someone treats others or handles pressure, it starts to feel theoretical. The words remain strong, but the impact weakens in the soul. That gap breeds disillusionment. In every era, there were people who returned to the source. They stripped faith down to obedience, compassion, and presence. They didn't argue loudly. They lived clearly for all. Their lives spoke louder than sermons ever could. If the message is true, why does it sometimes feel distant? What would change if your life became less about explanation and more about embodiment in the world? While institutions expanded outward, something else kept moving inward. There were believers who realized that no structure could govern what happened inside a human soul. The kingdom was not built with stone now. The kingdom was not built with stone. It was growing within. That idea was dangerous, because what lives inside cannot be policed. These seekers weren't rebels in the loud sense. They sought depth in the spirit. When they heard of prayer, they heard intimacy. When they heard of fasting, they heard clarity. Their faith didn't depend on permission. It depended on presence. For them, life wasn't proven by visibility today. For them, life wasn't proven by visibility. This kind of faith reshaped how people handled suffering and uncertainty. It offered stability through trust. Naturally, this inward focus made institutions uneasy. Inner freedom doesn't produce uniformity here. Personal conviction can't be standardized. When people begin listening inwardly, external authority loses its leverage. So, this dimension was often minimized or sidelined, but it survived in the quiet hearts. It survived in the moments of stillness when anxiety loosened its grip. It survived in people who chose compassion when fear would have been easier. The inner kingdom keeps forming people who look ordinary now. Their faith doesn't shout, it endures. If the most powerful part of your life lives within, why do you search for it everywhere else? When was the last time you experienced truth, not as an instruction today? When was the last time you experienced truth not as an instruction, but as an inner alignment? As we move closer to the present, something unexpected is surfacing. People aren't just abandoning the old ways. They are asking honest questions. They are looking for a faith that aligns with the life they are living. Advances in science and psychology have exposed contradictions that can no longer be ignored by us. Silence is no longer satisfying. This awakening feels unsettling to some, but it is necessary. Faith once provided clear answers, but now it must stand under scrutiny. People are wrestling with scripture now. People are wrestling with scripture, tradition, and experience all at once. They want a belief that can stand under pressure. Doubt is no longer treated as a weakness, but as a doorway to deeper understanding. This shift changes everything. Mental health is now part of the conversation. People are separating God from shame. Prayer is becoming more about honesty and less about reciting the right words in the dark. Productivity, purpose, and identity are being reshaped by a faith that has to work in the real world. This has raised alarms for those who crave control, but it is a sign of life. Individuals find the source. Individuals are rediscovering the source with fresh eyes. They aren't reading to defend a position. They are reading to understand themselves. The ancient words are becoming a mirror rather than a boundary. Faith that cannot be questioned cannot mature, and faith that cannot mature eventually becomes irrelevant. The Holy Spirit is moving through curiosity and courage. People are finding the divine in the heart. They are finding the divine not by rejecting tradition, but by re-examining it with humility. Are we witnessing the decline of a religion, or the shedding of what never belonged to it in the first place today. When faith is allowed to evolve without losing its core, it can finally become something whole again, what actually survives after centuries of change. When you strip away the institutions and the titles now, when you strip away the institutions, the titles, the fear, and the noise, something unmistakable remains. A thread that never broke, a core that refused to disappear. This core is easy to overlook by many. It is the call to love when fear is easier. It is the call to forgive when power feels safer. It is the choice of inner transformation over outward approval. This version of history didn't dominate the books. This version of history didn't dominate the books, but it shaped lives in unseen ways. It lived in people who practiced their convictions quietly and sincerely. They weren't obsessed with being right in life. They were committed to being aligned. They didn't chase influence. They cultivated integrity. Their lives showed up in how they treated others and how they handled suffering. This thread explains the truth. This remaining thread explains why the truth never fully collapsed. Systems failed, leaders fell, and trust eroded. Yet the essence endured because it was never dependent on structure alone in the world. It lived in the conscience and the compassion of the individual. This surviving form of truth asks more of us, not less. It cannot be outsourced to an authority. It demands responsibility and humility. It invites us to confront ourselves honestly. Transformation is always harder than belief. If the core never disappeared, the question is whether we are willing to engage with it as it truly is in the soul. It is quiet. It is demanding. It is deeply personal. The greatest misunderstanding is the belief that this story is finished. History suggests the opposite. The truth was never meant to be a closed system. It is a living current, moving through time. The moment it stops evolving, it stops being alive. What unsettles us is not that things change, but that the truth keeps demanding change from us in our lives. It is an inner reorientation. We are not invited to preserve a tradition. We are invited to follow a way of being. That invitation does not expire. It confronts every generation. It presses into our identity. It presses into our identity, our purpose, and our responsibility. It challenges how we love, how we lead, and how we endure. This kind of life cannot be consumed passively. It must be lived and chosen. It must be lived and chosen repeatedly. A finished religion can be managed. An unfolding path cannot. When the truth is alive, it disrupts our comfort and exposes our avoidance. It doesn't allow us to hide. It doesn't allow us to hide behind our beliefs while avoiding our own transformation. It insists on coherence between what we claim and how we actually live. The real ending of this story is found in you. The movement continues wherever someone chooses integrity over image. If the story was never finished, then what part of it is still waiting to be lived through your own hands? You have been given a glimpse of a reality that was never lost, only hidden in plain sight now. It was never about the performance or the institution, it was always about the path. So now, as we prepare to look at the most controversial turning point in this history, remember that you are free now. You don't have to carry someone else's version of the truth anymore. You can walk it, you can walk it, you can question it, and you can rediscover it for yourself. Not the safe version, but the real one. The story begins. Because the truest story is the one that begins again in you. To see how this hidden fire was almost extinguished by the very people who claimed to hold the match, we must look at the moment of the state. We must look at the moment where the internal kingdom met the external empire. What if the greatest tragedy in the history of faith was actually its most celebrated victory? We often look at the breakthrough. We often look at the moment Christianity moved from the shadows of the catacombs into the marble halls of the Roman Empire as a divine breakthrough, but from the perspective of a philosopher who has seen it. I see it differently. I see it as a hostile takeover of a spiritual startup. When a movement that was built on the currency of conviction is suddenly acquired by a system built on the currency of control. When a movement built on conviction is acquired by control, the original value is almost always diluted. Think about the mechanics of a modern corporation. When a small, disruptive company is bought by many. When a small company is bought by a massive conglomerate, the innovation usually dies. The passion is replaced by protocols. The mission is replaced by a balance sheet. This is exactly what happened to faith. This is exactly what happened when faith met the state. We celebrated the end of persecution, but we failed to see the beginning of a spiritual debt that we are still paying today. If you were a believer, if you were a believer in those early hidden rooms, your faith was your most valuable asset. It was a liquid asset, meaning you could take it anywhere. It was not tied to a building, a title, or a status. It was a lived reality that moved with you into the marketplace and into your home. But the moment faith became organized, it became a fixed asset. It became heavy. It became something you had to protect. It became something you had to protect rather than something that protected you in the world of wealth building. We know that the most dangerous thing you can do is become house poor, where capital is locked. Many modern believers are spirit poor. They have massive institutional structures, grand cathedrals in Europe and mega churches in the United States, but very little spiritual liquidity. They have no flow. They have the appearance of wealth, but no actual cash flow of the soul. Let us apply some inverse logic to the concept of religious safety. We are taught that a safe religion is a good religion today. We want our families to be part of something stable and predictable. But in the realm of personal development, stability is often the enemy of growth. If you want to build a legacy for your family now, if you want to build a legacy, you do not teach your children to seek the path of least resistance. You teach them to embrace the friction that creates character. The early version of Christianity was risk. The early version of Christianity was dangerous, and because it was dangerous, it was transformative. It required a level of risk management that forced individuals to be fully present when you remove it. When you remove the risk, you remove the need for the Holy Spirit. If the system handles everything, why do you need a relationship with the divine? We have traded the high-risk, high-reward movement now. We have traded the movement for a low-risk, zero-return system of religious obligation. Consider the landscape of America today. We see the remnants of this institutional shift everywhere. We see platform. We have built a culture that values the platform over the path. We see leaders who are more concerned with their brand than with their inner kingdom. This is a classic case of prioritizing short-term gains. This is a classic case of prioritizing short-term gains over long-term sustainability. In financial philosophy, we call this burning the furniture to keep the house warm. When an institution uses fear When an institution uses fear to maintain control, it is essentially taking out a high-interest loan on the future of its members. The fear might produce immediate obedience, but interest is resentment. The long-term interest is resentment, disillusionment, and eventual bankruptcy of faith. If you are building a life or a business on fear, you are building on sand. True wealth is built on trust and truth. True wealth, whether financial or spiritual, is built on the foundation of trust and integrity. What if the silence of those hidden stories mentioned in the records was not an accident, but a strategic plan? When a system wants to maintain a monopoly, it must eliminate the competition. The competition for an institutional church is not other religions. It is the individual who has a direct line to God now. An individual who knows how to listen to the inner kingdom is a liability to a system that demands uniformity. This is why the nuance was lost. This is why the questions were replaced by pre-packaged answers. In the marketplace, a monopoly leads to stagnation and poor quality. In the realm of faith, a monopoly of thought leads to a stagnation of the soul. We have been sold a simplified version of truth today. We have been sold a simplified version because it is easier to manage. But the cost of that simplification is our own maturity. Think about your own life for a moment. Conduct an audit of your beliefs now. Conduct an audit of your beliefs. How many of them are yours, and how many are just inherited traditions that you have never questioned? We often treat our faith like an old family heirloom in a box. We do not use it. We do not test its strength. We just pass it down. But a legacy is not something you leave for people. It is something you leave in people. If your faith does not help you now, if your faith does not help you navigate a financial crisis, a family conflict, or a mental health struggle, then what is it actually worth? In the world of investing, we look for assets that perform well. In the world of investing, we look for assets that perform well in volatile markets. The original, unedited version of Christianity was designed for volatility. It was designed for people with spirit. It was designed for people who had nothing but their connection to the spirit. The modern, managed version often fails the moment the market of life turns red. Let us look at the law versus invitation. Let us look at the concept of the law versus the invitation. When faith became a law, it became a form of spiritual taxation. You had to pay your dues in compliance to avoid the penalty of exclusion. But an invitation is different. An invitation implies a choice, and choice is the prerequisite for love. You cannot force someone to be wealthy, and you cannot force someone to be transformed in heart. Wealth is the result of disciplined choices over time, and transformation is the result of a disciplined heart. When we replace the invitation with an obligation, we kill the motivation for growth now. We end up with a society of people who are acting out a script rather than living out a conviction. This is why so many people feel a sense of emptiness, even when they are doing everything right by rules. They are following the law but missing the life. If we look at the rise of control through an inverse lens, we see that the people who sought to protect the faith actually ended up suffocating it today. It is like a parent who is so afraid of their child getting hurt that they never let them leave the house. The child stays safe, but they never become an adult. They never learn how to build life. They never learn how to build their own life or manage their own risks. Much of what we call church history is the story of an overprotective parent trying to keep the children in the nursery today. But we were never meant for the nursery. We were meant for the world. We were meant to take the principles of the inner kingdom and apply them to the complexities of economics, family, and identity. What if the divisions we see today are actually a sign of a market correction? In the financial world, a correction is painful but necessary. It removes the bloat and brings prices back to reality. Perhaps the fracturing of modern institutions is the Spirit's way of forcing us back to the core. We are being stripped of our platforms so that we can find our path again. We are being forced to choose. We are forced to choose between the safety of the system and the power of the movement. If you are someone who feels lost in the noise of modern religion, you might actually be in the best position now. You might actually be in the best position to rediscover the original fire. You are no longer blinded by the grand architecture, so you can finally see the quiet light of the Holy Spirit in the heart. In the United States, we often conflate our national identity with our spiritual identity. We talk about being a Christian nation, but we must ask if we are following the system or the movement now. A system seeks to dominate the culture, but a movement seeks to serve the individual. A system builds monuments, but a movement builds people. If our faith is just a tool for political leverage today, if our faith is just a tool for political or social leverage, then it is not the faith of the early followers. It is just another form of secular power, wearing a religious mask to gain social status. To truly develop yourself and your family, you must learn to distinguish between the mask and the face. You must be willing to invest your time and energy in the things that have eternal value in life. As we move forward, we must ask ourselves the difficult questions that the system tries to avoid. If your faith was taken away tomorrow, what would be left of your character if you had no leader now? If you had no building to go to and no leader to follow, Would you still know how to find God in the silence? This is the ultimate stress test for the soul. The version that was almost erased survives. The version of Christianity that was almost erased is the only version that can survive this test. It is the version that lives in the inner kingdom, beyond the reach of any human authority today now. It is the version that understands that true wealth is not what you have, but who you are becoming. It is a path of radical integrity that refuses to be bought or sold by any system in the world. The journey of the two disciples on the road to Emmaus is the perfect metaphor for the inverse path. They were walking away from the center of power, heavy with the failure of their expectations in life. They thought the movement had died because the system had crushed it. But the truth was that the movement was walking right beside them, unrecognized. This is the reality for many of us today now. We are looking for God in the spectacular, in the big wins and the public miracles. But the real work of the Spirit is often found in the quiet conversations, the breaking of bread, and the heart. It is found when we stop trying to manage the outcome and start embracing the process. If you want to build a life of true significance, you must be willing to go against the grain of the managed life. You must be willing to be a nonconformist in a world of religious and secular compliance. This does not mean being a rebel for the sake of rebellion. It means being so aligned with your inner truth. It means being so aligned with your inner truth that you no longer need the approval of the crowd. This is the highest form of personal development. It is the point where faith and finance meet today. It is where your faith, your finances, and your family life all come into a single, coherent focus. You are no longer living a fragmented life. You are living a whole life in the spirit of truth. This is the promise of the original movement. A promise that was never meant to be a secret. When we look at the history of the church, we see a constant tension between the priest and the prophet. The priest represents the system, the preservation of tradition, and the maintenance of order. The prophet represents the movement, the call to transformation, and the disruption of the status quo now. Both have a role, but when the priest silences the prophet, the faith becomes a museum. We are living in a time that desperately needs the prophetic voice again. Not a voice that shouts from a stage. Not a voice that shouts from a platform, but a voice that speaks from the depths of a transformed life. A voice that reminds us that we were made for more than just survival and compliance in life. We were made for the kingdom that is within us. As we continue to peel back the layers of this story, we must be prepared for the discomfort that comes with deconstructing our inherited certainties. It is like renovating an old house. You have to tear down the drywall to see the rot in the foundation. It is messy, it is expensive, and it takes time. But it is the only way to build for good. It is the only way to build something that will last. Many people are afraid to look too closely at the history of their faith because they are afraid it will all fall apart. But if truth kills it, if it can be destroyed by the truth, it deserves to be destroyed. The truth is not a threat to the real movement. It is the fuel that keeps it burning. We have spent centuries making it safe now. We have spent centuries trying to make Christianity safe, respectable, and manageable. We have turned the lion into a house cat. But the world does not need a house cat. It needs the wild strength. It needs the strength and the wildness of the original message. It needs a faith that can stand up to the pressures of a global economy and the anxieties of a digital age. It needs faith and love. It needs a faith that is not afraid to say no to the systems of control and yes to the way of love. This is the investment that will pay the greatest dividends for your life and your family. It is the only legacy that truly matters. If we look at the concept of spiritual capital, we see that the early church was incredibly wealthy despite having no money. They had courage and connection. They had the capital of courage, the capital of community, and the capital of connection to the divine. They were able to outlast the Roman Empire because their assets were not subject to inflation now. Our modern challenge is to rebuild that kind of capital In a world that is obsessed with the material, we must learn how to diversify our lives so that our worth is not tied to our bank account today. We must invest in the hidden things, the quiet prayers, the honest work, and the deep relationships that form the backbone of a resilient life. The silence between the lines of history is power. The silence between the lines of history is where the real power lies. It is the space where the spirit moves without permission. It is the space where you can find your own voice and your own path. Do not be afraid of the silence. Do not be afraid of the questions. They are not signs of weakness. They are signs of a maturing soul. The more you are willing to wrestle with the truth in heart, the more you are willing to wrestle with the truth, the more you will find that the truth is not a set of facts, but a way of being. It is a way of being that is as old as the hills now. It is as old as the hills and as fresh as the morning. It is the upside-down life, where the last are first and the poor are rich. As we transition from this analysis of the inverse today, we must begin to look at the patterns that emerge when we stop fighting the reality of things. There is a logic to the universe, a sequence of cause and effect that governs both the spirit now. A sequence of cause and effect that governs both the spiritual and the material realms. When we understand these laws, we can stop struggling against the current and start moving with it in life. The next logical step is to see how these hidden truths actually manifest in the world when they are allowed to follow their natural course. We have looked at how things went wrong in the history. We must look at why the core remains so undeniably right. There is a light that no darkness can put out, and it is time to see how that light guides us through the complexities of existence. The transition from a fluid movement to a structured system is not an accident of history, but a manifestation of a fundamental law of growth. When we look at the evolution of quiet rooms today, we are seeing the same logic that governs the expansion of a small family business into a global corporation. In the beginning, there is the raw energy of a founder and the shared conviction here. In those early days, as the records show, faith was a lived experience. It was an asset that did not require a ledger because it was written in the hearts of the people, but scale demands structure. As any economist or philosopher will tell you, scale demands structure, complexity requires management. This is the affirmative dialectic of human organization. We must recognize that hierarchy came. We must recognize that the creation of hierarchies and titles was a response to the need for survival in a hostile market of ideas. When the early believers gathered in secret to share meals now, when they gathered to whisper prayers, they were practicing a form of social capital that the world had never seen. They were forgiving debts and sharing resources at a time when Rome was extraction. They were moving from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. They understood that true wealth is not found in what you hoard, but in the quality of the relationships you cultivate in the world. In a modern context, we see this in the way successful families build legacies. It is not just about the trust fund or the real estate portfolio. It is about the shared values and discipline here. It is about the internal discipline that keep the family unit cohesive across generations. If the early church had not organized, the message might have evaporated like a mist. Structure was vessel. The structure was the vessel. Even if the vessel eventually began to overshadow the wine, think about the way a brand operates in the United States today. A brand starts with a promise of truth. A brand starts with a promise, a core value that resonates with people. As that brand grows, it needs marketing, legal departments, and middle management. Eventually, the bureaucracy can become thick. Eventually, the bureaucracy can become so thick that the original promise is buried under layers of corporate policy. This is exactly what happened when Christianity met the machinery of Rome now. The recognition by power was the ultimate merger and acquisition. It provided safety and resources, but it also introduced the need for compliance and standardization. We see this in finance today. When you are starting out, your financial decisions are driven by raw necessity and personal hustle. But as your net worth grows, you find yourself dealing with tax codes and estate planning now. The danger is that you start living for the system you built, rather than the life the system was meant to support. If you find yourself reflecting on these shifts in your own journey of growth, perhaps it is time to connect with a community that values the deep architecture of thought. On this channel, The Upside Down Life, we believe that true intelligence is the ability to see laws. True intelligence is the ability to see the invisible laws operating beneath the visible surface. Subscribing to this perspective is an investment in your own mental capital. It is commitment. It is a commitment to a life that is not just successful on the outside, but coherent on the inside. Joining us is a way of saying that you are ready to look at the world through a lens today. Joining us is a way of saying you are ready to look at the world through a lens that flips the conventional narrative on its head. When a system prioritizes order over transformation, it is making a trade-off. It is trading the volatile, unpredictable power of individual conviction for the steady output of institutional loyalty. In the world of finance, this is the difference between a high-growth startup and a blue-chip utility stock. The institution provides stability, but it often loses the ability to innovate soul. The early writings that were set aside were often those that emphasized personal spiritual authority. Why? Because personal authority is hard to tax and impossible to police. It is a liability. From a management perspective, it is a liability, but from a human development perspective, it is the highest form of equity. When we talk about the development of the self and the family now, we must ask ourselves what we are optimizing for. Are we building a home that looks perfect on social media but feels like a prison on the inside? Are we raising children who follow rules today? Are we raising children who know how to follow rules but do not know how to listen to their own conscience? The shift in Christianity from a path to a platform mirrors the shift in families now. We have become experts at managing the image, while the substance of our character remains underdeveloped. The original movement of Jesus was focused on the transformation of the heart today. The transformation of the heart is the ultimate lead indicator of a successful life. If the heart is aligned, the external actions will eventually follow. If the heart is neglected, collapse. If the heart is neglected, no amount of external wealth or religious compliance can prevent an eventual collapse. Consider the reality of the American dream. We have built the engine here. We have built the most sophisticated economic engine in history. Yet we see record levels of anxiety and spiritual exhaustion. This is the logical consequence of a culture that has laws now. We have more information than any generation in history, yet we struggle with a lack of meaning. This is because meaning cannot be manufactured by a system. It must be discovered in silence. It must be felt in the breaking of bread and the honest conversation. The early Christians who walked the road to Emmaus did not find truth in a lecture hall. They found it in a shared journey. They found it in a shared journey and a moment of recognition. This is a law of human psychology. We do not learn through passive consumption. We learn through active embodiment in the life. Is your faith or your philosophy of life something you use to impress others? Or is it the quiet anchor that holds you steady when the market crashes or a relationship fails in the world? If your belief system does not guide your decisions when it costs you money or reputation, then it is not an asset. It is a decorative ornament. True financial wisdom and spiritual maturity meet. True financial wisdom and spiritual maturity converge at the point of integrity. Integrity is the state of being whole and undivided, when your inner world and your outer world are in alignment. When your inner world and your outer world are in alignment, you possess a form of wealth that cannot be inflated away by central banks or stolen by competitors. This is the story of survivors. The ones who endured were not always the ones with the most power, but the ones with the most coherence. As we continue to peel back the layers of this historical and philosophical evolution now, it becomes clear that the spirit of the original movement never truly died. It simply went underground. It moved into the private journals. the whispered prayers, and the quiet acts of charity. It moved into the quiet acts of charity that no institution could claim. This is the principle of the remnant. In any economy, when the main system becomes corrupt, a parallel economy emerges. In the realm of the spirit, this parallel economy is where the real work of transformation happens. It is where individuals take responsibility for their own growth rather than outsourcing today. It is where individuals take responsibility for their own growth rather than outsourcing it to a professional class of leaders. This is a crucial lesson for anyone seeking to build a life now. You cannot outsource your character development to your church, your government, or your employer. You are the chief executive officer of your own soul. You are responsible for peace and clarity. You are responsible for the dividends of peace and clarity that your life produces. If you are waiting for a system to give you permission to be great, you will be waiting forever in time. The early believers did not wait for the Roman Empire to approve of their message. They lived it until the empire had no choice but to take notice. They understood the law of compounding power. A small group of people with total conviction will always outperform a large group of people with half-hearted compliance. As we observe the world today, we see a great shaking of institutions. Trust in traditional structures is at an all-time low. This is not a tragedy. It is a market correction. It is the shedding of what was never essential so that the core can be found again. If you are part of this awakening, you are not alone. You are part of a long lineage of seekers who realize that the map is not the territory. The map is the doctrine and the rule book now. The territory is the actual experience of God, the actual practice of love, and the actual struggle for justice. We are living in a time where the territory is calling us back to the heart. For those of you who feel the weight of these truths, the upside-down life is more than just a channel name. It is a lifestyle. It is a way of navigating the complexities of the modern world. It is navigating the world with an ancient wisdom that has been refined in the fire of history. When you click that notification bell and engage with this community, you are participating now. You are participating in a global dialogue about what it means to be truly human. We are not interested in the surface-level noise. We are interested in the signal. We want the truths today. We are interested in the truths that remain when everything else is stripped away. Your engagement here is what keeps this fire burning. The logic of the spirit is often the opposite here. The world says that to get ahead, you must compete and climb. The spirit says that to truly rise, you must serve and ascend. The world says that your value is determined by your net worth now. The spirit says that your value is intrinsic and infinite. This is not just poetic language. It is a practical framework for living. If you believe your value is tied to your bank account today, if you believe your value is tied to your bank account, you will be a slave to the market. If you believe your value is intrinsic, you can walk through a financial crisis with your head high. You can lead your family with a sense of security that is not dependent on the next paycheck. This is the ultimate form of financial freedom. We must look at the role of fear in systems. As the SRT data indicates, as Christianity became more established, fear began to replace transformation. This is a common tactic in both religious and political systems. Fear is a motivator. Fear is a powerful short-term motivator. It can fill buildings and ensure compliance, but it is a terrible long-term strategy for growth. Fear creates a culture of hiding and performance now. It erodes trust and stifles creativity. In a family, if you lead through fear, you will produce children who are good at lying but bad at living. In a business, if you manage through fear now, you will lose your best talent to competitors who offer a culture of psychological safety. The early movement was based on a love that casts out fear. It was based on the idea of acceptance. It was based on the idea that you are accepted before you are corrected. This is the environment in which true transformation takes place. When we look at the historical fracture points now, We see the inevitable result of prioritizing correctness over connection. When certainty hardens into an identity, it creates an us versus them mentality. This is the death of empathy in soul. In the financial world, we see this in the way different schools of economic thought become dogmatic. People become so attached to their theories that they ignore the reality of human beings. They ignore the reality of human beings affected by their policies. The antidote to this is humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less in the world. It is the ability to remain open to new data and different perspectives. It is the recognition that no single system can capture the full complexity of the truth. The forgotten core is life. The forgotten core of the message was always the life of the messenger. Jesus did not leave behind a systematic theology. He left behind a way of life. He showed us how to handle power now. He showed us how to handle power by giving it away. He showed us how to handle suffering by moving toward it. He showed us how to handle wealth by being indifferent to it. Coherence is authority. In our own lives, we must strive for this same coherence. If you talk about family values but spend all your time at the office, you have a coherence problem. If you talk about wisdom now, if you talk about financial wisdom but are drowning in consumer debt, you have a coherence problem. The world is tired of messengers. It is looking for the message embodied in a human life today. As we move forward, we must ask ourselves what parts of our inherited faith and culture are worth keeping and what parts need to be shed. This is the process of pruning in gardening now. Pruning is the act of cutting away dead or overgrown branches so that the plant can produce more fruit. In our personal lives, we must prune the habits, beliefs, and relationships today. We must prune the things that are no longer serving our growth. This is often painful. It requires us to confront our own shadows and admit where we have been wrong. But it is the only way now. It is the only way to reach maturity. The institutions of the past may be crumbling, but the truth they were meant to protect is more alive than ever. The inner kingdom is the part of you now. The inner kingdom is the part of you that cannot be controlled by an algorithm, a government, or a religious leader. It is the seat of your autonomy and your dignity. You become substance. When you cultivate this inner space, you become a person of substance. You become someone who can stand in the middle of a storm and not be moved. This is the goal of all great philosophy. It is the development of a soul that is bigger than its circumstances. As we look at the challenges of the 21st century, from artificial intelligence to global economic shifts now, this inner stability will be our most valuable asset. It will be the thing that allows us to adapt without losing our essence. The real story of Christianity is not a story of the past. It is a story of the present. It is happening right now in the choices you make today. It is happening in the way you treat the person who can do nothing for you. It is happening in the way. It is happening in the way you manage your resources and the way you invest in your family. The movement is still alive, but it is not looking for followers. It is looking for people now. It is looking for those who are brave enough to listen to the silence between the lines and act on what they hear. This is the path of the upside-down life. It is demanding and quiet today. It is quiet and deeply personal, but it is the only path that leads to a life that is truly whole. As we conclude this part of our investigation into the affirmative laws of faith and life, we begin to see a bridge forming, a bridge between the ancient whispers of the first century and the complex noise of our modern world. The thread that never broke is now in your hands now. It is a thread of integrity, a thread of courage, and a thread of unrelenting love. How you weave this thread into the fabric of your own life will determine the legacy you leave behind now. The laws of cause and effect are always in motion. What you plant today will determine what you harvest tomorrow. In the next stage of our journey, we will look at how to take principles We will look at how to take these abstract principles and turn them into a concrete strategy for daily living. We will explore the mechanics of the modern awakening and how to stand firm now. The story is not over, in fact, for those who are willing to see. It is only just beginning. We are moving from the theory of the law to the practice of the life. We are moving from history. We are moving from the history of the system to the reality of the transformation. Prepare yourself, because the shift from knowing to being is the most significant leap a human being takes. It is the moment where the philosophy becomes a reality and the seeker becomes the path. This transition is where we find our true power and our true purpose. Stay with me as we navigate now. Stay with me as we navigate the turning points that make sense of it all. If we are to take these philosophical realizations and plant them into the soil of our daily existence in the world, we must look at the economy of the soul with the same rigor we apply to our financial ledgers. The transition from a movement to a grand institution was not just a change in architecture today. It was a change in the way human beings calculated value. When we talk about the upside-down life, we are talking about a radical restructuring of our personal balance sheets in the modern day. In the modern world, especially in places like the United States or across the Western landscape, where the echoes of these ancient stories still ring, we have been trained to seek security now. We build walls, we accumulate assets, and we seek the approval of systems that promise us safety in exchange for our conformity. But the original story of the early followers of Jesus' truth, the original story suggests a different kind of wealth, one that does not depreciate when the markets of the world fluctuate. Think for a moment about the concept of debt in our economy now. In our current economic reality, debt is a tool of leverage, but it is also a chain of control. The early movement flourished because it practiced a form of radical debt cancellation today. When the text speaks of people sharing resources and forgiving those who owed them, it was not merely a nice gesture, it was a strategic dismantling of the power structures that keep us enslaved. It was a strategic dismantling of the structures that keep individuals enslaved to anxiety. If you want to develop your life and your family today, you must ask what kind of debts you carry. I am not just talking about the mortgage or the credit card balance, though those are significant. I am talking about the emotional and spiritual debt of seeking validation from systems today. To live the original path is to realize that your primary asset is your integrity and your connection to the inner kingdom. This is the ultimate diversification of your life and soul. When you invest in your character, you are placing your capital in a vault that no government can seize and no inflation can erode. We see this play out in the history of nations today. We see this in nations built on the idea of individual conscience. When the focus remains on the internal transformation of the person, the family unit becomes a powerhouse of resilience now. A family that operates on the principles of the early movement, where roles are defined by service rather than dominance, creates a legacy that lasts for generations. This is building house. In ancient Greek, the word for management of the household is oikonomia, which is where we get our word for economics. True economics begins at the dinner table with the shared meal now. It begins with the shared meal and the whispered prayer, the very things the early believers used to anchor their souls. If your household is a place of peace and transparency, you have attained a level of prosperity that the wealthiest person in the world would envy if they are living in a mansion filled with conflict. In the context of the modern United States now, we often see a version of Christianity that has become a brand. It is marketed like a product, promising a return on investment that looks like material gain. But we see the fracture today. If we look at the historical fracture point where power met faith, we see that the real power was never in the grand halls. The real power was in the person who could not be bought now. When your sense of self and your sense of purpose are rooted in the Holy Spirit, you become a dangerous element to any system of control because you are no longer motivated by fear of loss. This is the ultimate financial freedom. If you do not fear losing your status or your comfort because you have found a steady anchor within, you can make decisions based on truth today. Imagine the advantage this gives a person in the marketplace. While everyone else is reacting to the noise of the news and the volatility of the crowd, the person aligned can remain calm. They can see the long term. They can act with a clarity that others mistake for luck. Developing your life and your family requires a rejection of the safe version of the story today. The safe version tells you to fit in, to follow the rules of the institution, and to measure your success by the standards of the world. But the real version tells you of transformation. The real version, the one that was almost erased, tells you that transformation is a daily labor. It asks you to look at your work not just as a way to earn a paycheck, but as a kingdom. How do you treat your employees? How do you handle a business deal when you have the upper hand? If you choose compassion over control, you are practicing the original faith in your life. And while this might seem like it costs you something in the short term, the long-term dividends are staggering. You build a reputation for integrity that becomes your most valuable money. People want to do business with you. Your family respects you. Your mind remains clear. We must also confront the reality of how we plan for the future in a system driven by fear now. We plan out of a desperate need to survive. We hoard because we do not trust that there will be enough. But the early movement operated on a principle of abundance in the spirit today. This does not mean they were naive or that they did not work hard. On the contrary, they were incredibly industrious, but their industry was fueled by a sense of purpose and lack now. When you change the engine of your life from fear to purpose, your productivity changes. You no longer work to avoid a nightmare. You work to build a dream. This shift is the foundation. This shift in mindset is the foundation of true wealth creation. It allows you to see opportunities where others see obstacles. It allows you to invest in people as a productive force. For those of us living in the modern age, the challenge is to rediscover this living movement within the structures we have inherited. It is like finding a hidden spring beneath a well. The water is still there, but you have to dig past the layers of tradition and control to reach it. This digging process is what we call personal development in our daily walk today. It is the hard work of questioning why we believe what we believe and ensuring that our actions match our convictions. If you say you value your family, but you spend all your time now. If you spend all your time chasing a title in a system that would replace you in a week, if you were gone, there is a lack of coherence in your life. The original path calls for change. It calls for you to put the kingdom first, which means putting the eternal and the internal above the temporary and the external. As you walk this path, you will find that the world around you begins to change, not because the world itself has changed, but because your relationship to it has been transformed by the power of the Spirit. You become a person of influence rather than a person of power. Power is the ability to force others to do your will, but influence is the ability to inspire others to follow your lead. The early believers had no power in the Roman Empire, yet their influence eventually reshaped the entire world. They did this by being the most honest and compassionate people in life. They were the most resilient people in the room. This is the model for how we should approach our careers and our public lives today. We do not need to fight for a platform in the world. The silence between the lines of history is where we find the instructions for this kind of living. It is found in the moments where we choose to listen rather than to speak to others. It is found when we choose to give rather than to take, and to trust rather than to worry. In the United States, we have a unique opportunity to reclaim this heritage of the individual. We live in a society that values the freedom of the individual to pursue truth. But that freedom is a responsibility. It requires us to be the architects of our own spiritual life now. We cannot outsource our growth to a church, a government, or a corporation. We must take ownership of the inner kingdom. When you do this, you realize the story was never a system today. This transition from theory to practice is where most people falter. It is easy to agree with a philosophy, but it is difficult to live it when it costs you something in your own life. Yet, the cost is exactly what gives it value. In the world of finance, we know that there is no such thing as a risk-free return. The same is true in the spiritual life of the person. To experience the power of the original movement, you must be willing to risk the safety of the status quo. You must be willing to be the person who forgives the debt in the heart now. You must be the one who speaks the truth even when it is unpopular, and who invests in the invisible. As we look toward the final convergence of these ideas, we must ask if we are ready. We must ask ourselves if we are ready to see the full picture, even if it challenges everything we thought we knew about our own success. The movement is still alive and waiting today. It is waiting for those who are brave enough to step out of the grand halls and back into the quiet rooms where real change happens. This leads us to consider what actually survives now. How can we find that thread in our own lives today? The moment of convergence is here. We have walked through the hidden corridors of history and the silent rooms of the soul in time. Now, we must ask what happens when these two worlds collide in the present day. If the version of Christianity you were taught was not the whole story, then success might be incomplete. The version of success you were taught might also be an incomplete picture. Everything we have discussed about faith, power, and truth has a direct parallel in how you build your wealth. It has a parallel in how you lead your family and how you govern your own mind. The thread that never broke in history is the same thread that holds your life together today in spirit. It is the realization that true power does not come from the system, but from the source. In the early days, Christianity was a living movement. It was about shared meals and prayers now. It was about people making sense of a world that no longer fit the old rules. In the same way, true financial freedom is not about following a rigid system of numbers in a book today. It is about making sense of an economy that is shifting beneath your feet. It is about finding a way to stand inside reality with a deeper sense of purpose in your daily life and work. When we look at the rise of control in history, we see how fear replaced transformation. When faith became a law, it became an obligation rather than a choice for the people in the world. This is exactly what happens when you allow your financial life to be governed by fear. You become a slave to the expectations of others. You follow a script written by those who know not. You seek outward approval while ignoring your inner kingdom. But the untold truth is that your life was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be a path of integrity and growth. Consider the fractured point where unity was lost, because people wanted to be right rather than real. We see this in families every day. We see it in businesses where the message is loud. When you focus more on the appearance of success than the integrity of your character, you lose the very thing that makes success sustainable. You build a grand hall with no fire inside. The real turning points are never the public miracles or the big paydays. The real turning points are the private transformations. It is the moment you decide to forgive a debt in life. It is the moment you choose to share your resources when self-preservation made more sense. This is the philosophy of the upside-down life. It is the understanding of gain and loss now. It is the understanding that to gain your life, you must be willing to let go of the safe versions of it. True wealth is not just about what you have in the bank account today now. It is about the quality of your presence and the strength of your alignment. If the most powerful part of faith lives within, then the most powerful part of your prosperity lies there. It is your ability to remain steady when the world is shaking. It is your commitment to building a legacy that is not built with stone, but with the lives you have touched in time. As we reach this point of convergence, we realize that Christianity was never finished. Your story is not finished. The greatest misunderstanding is believing that essential things are done. The truth is that the Spirit is still moving. It is moving through your questions. It is moving through your doubts. It is moving through the way you handle your money and your time now. You do not have to carry a filtered tradition or a heavy script. You can walk the path of integrity. You can choose a faith that is not a platform, but a way of being in the world today. Every system simplifies to survive. But you were not meant to be a simplified version of yourself. You were meant to be whole. This requires a modern awakening in the heart and the mind. It requires you to look at your life with fresh eyes and shed what never belonged to you in the first place. This is not a decline. This is a refining process of the soul and truth. When you strip away the noise and the fear, you find the core that refused to disappear. You find a quiet, demanding, and deeply personal truth that guides your every step in the world. If you have made it this far, you are no longer searching for a safe version of the story. You are searching for the real one. You are ready to engage with life as it truly is now. The story is now handing you the pen. Your financial decisions, your family values, and your spiritual convictions are all part of the same tapestry. Do not let them be fragmented today. Let them be a coherent expression of who you are. The upside-down life is not an escape from reality. It is a deeper way of standing inside it. It is the start of the journey now. It is the realization that the version of the story you were told was just the beginning. The rest is up to you. You can choose to live a life that is loud and empty in the world, or you can choose a life that is quiet and resilient. You can follow the crowd, or you can follow the calling that has been whispering to you since the very beginning of your life. As we close this chapter, I want you to remember that transformation is harder than belief. It asks more of you, but it offers a reward that cannot be measured in gold or silver now. It offers a peace that surpasses understanding. It offers a clarity that guides your decisions when it costs you something. This is the enduring thread. This is the light of the world. This is the light that no darkness can overcome. Thank you for walking this path with me. If this journey has challenged you, if it has stirred something deep within your soul today, if it stirred something deep, then you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Do not ignore that feeling. Use it to realign your life. Use it to build something that lasts in time. If you found value in this deep dive into the hidden heart of faith and life, I invite you to join our community here at the Upside Down Life. This is a space for the brave ones now. It is a space for those brave enough to ask the hard questions and wise enough to listen for the quiet answers. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications for us now. Turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of this unfolding story. Share this with someone who is also tired of the noise and searching for the truth in their own life today. The next episode will take us even deeper into the most controversial turning points of our shared history. It is a journey you will not want to miss, because it is where pieces fit now. It is where the pieces finally start to fit together. Until then, remember that the truest version of your life begins again in you today. Stay curious, stay humble, and walk the path.